Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is Jon Dutton. He's a sports management graduate with over 25 years of experience from the sports industry. He has previously worked for the PGA European Golf Tour, Manchester Football Association, and he has had his own sports consultancy company. Moreover, he was the operations director for the Rugby League World Cup 2013, director of readiness for the Tour de France Grand Depart in 2014, and tournament director for the last Rugby League Four Nations tournament in 2016. Today, he serves as the chief executive at the Rugby League World Cup 2021, which is scheduled to take place in England in October 2021. Jon Dutton, welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you for the invitation, Marcus.
You are the CEO of the Rugby League World Cup 2021. Can you tell us a little bit what this role includes?
Yeah, this is a global sporting tournament. It's a project I've been working on since 2015. So we are staging the men's, women's and wheelchair tournaments all together for the first time ever. We have 61 games, 21 venues, 32 different teams, and we are well on with our planning. Of course, we are in the middle of a pandemic, which has made things slightly more complicated. I know we can come on to talk about that. But Rugby League, for people that may never have seen it, it's a game that celebrated its 125th birthday last week. It's a physical, fast-moving, skillful game, and we're really looking forward to having a global showcase.
You started this planning process in 2015. How is the planning process going? And can you walk us through a little bit what you've been doing over the last 5 years?
I think if we start way back in November 2015, when we first went to UK government and asked for some funding support to help stage the tournament. I've been involved. This is my third Rugby League World Cup, so 2013, 2017, and now 2021. So at the start, it was having the funding to bid, winning the bid, and then setting a company up. And we did all of those things. And now we are months away from the actual tournament. So the focus has shifted a lot in the early days to selecting our venues. And we have done that. We ran a competitive process. Now we're about to go on sale. So our focus is about marketing the tournament, exciting people, engaging with people, trying to transcend Rugby League. So trying to make sure that the people that come to watch this come as part of an experience rather than specifically just for the sport. We're both sports fans, Marcus, and we know the excitement that a World Cup in any sport brings. So really challenging times at the moment. And the pandemic has affected us all in different ways. Certainly for us, we are fortunate that we still have time on our side. Clearly, the uncertain environment has made us think long and hard and change our plans.
Yeah, we will talk more about the COVID-19 later. But you mentioned that this year you will host a men's, women's and wheelchair tournament at the same event. How did you come to this conclusion?
Yeah, the two things that we really stand for, Marcus, are inclusivity. So having those three tournaments together, a drive towards equality. And some of the things that we've done as part of that are introducing prize money for both the wheelchair and women's tournaments, equalising participation fees across all three tournaments. And taking some fairly bold and brave moves. But we did that underpinned by our vision, which is to stage the biggest and best ever Rugby League World Cup, and also our mission, which is to deliver inspirational moments that excite and engage and are part of a social impact programme. So how did we do all of that? It was about having a vision, having a plan, getting the right people on board and being really ambitious. And everything we've done, I think, all through this project, we've been really ambitious. Lots of people are asking, is this a blueprint for others to follow? I hope so, but it's for us now is to get on, deliver, be successful and hopefully pass that knowledge on to other people.
You're putting a lot of emphasis on CSR. Why is that so important for you?
I've been involved in professional sport for 25 years and have attended and been part of many different sporting events. And a lot of people talk about legacy. And we've tried not to use the word legacy. We try to talk about social impact. So a sports event in the main will try and have an impact, a positive impact on the number of people playing that sport. And we've looked at it through a completely different lens, Marcus. So we've tried to say, instead of convincing people to ultimately play rugby league, let's take away the physicality aspect. Let's take away any barriers to actually playing and just try and engage with people in a different way. So we put together our social social impact program based on a big public health program, so focused on mental fitness, and I think that's never more relevant than at this current time. A big volunteering project, investing into community facilities. We have heritage, we have culture, we have an international development program focusing on sports diplomacy. So actually our social impact program is wide and varied, and it's done with the intention of engaging with people who might not be interested in the sports or might not want to ultimately play the sport. So it's a different approach. And one of the things we're trying to do as well is to measure in a qualitative way people's experiences. And that's really hard. We've had lots of smart minds trying to ultimately work out how we do that. So we're a long way through trying to put a metric in place that we can actually measure something that maybe hasn't been measured before.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it goes a little bit aligned with your values, which are bold and brave, world-class, authentic, and inclusive. Can you elaborate a little bit on those?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've said already is very relevant. So bold and brave, to be ambitious, to be a disruptor. I certainly think we have disrupted the space that we've occupied and will continue to do so. Authentic is very much about, it's very easy to make statements. It's very easy to say, we will do this. It's actually to back that up and get on and deliver that. And again, I think we've been successful so far. World class is to get everyone looking up rather than looking down. We are a world-class global sporting tournament. The challenge for Rugby League is for it to be played in more countries, to have more of an international footprint. And we're really excited that Brazil, the first ever South American team, will play in the tournament. Jamaica make their debut. Greece, who have overcome some incredible adversity to qualify, Pacific nations, and so on. So actually the footprint already has been extended, but it needs to be extended further. And inclusive, as we've mentioned, is that drive towards equality.
It's an international sport and you have many teams participating, but what is the plan for growing the sport?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be very careful in just making sure we run the tournament and we run it in that world-class way. So we're not the International Federation. We work very closely with them and it is their responsibility to grow the game. But clearly a World Cup in any sport can act as a catalyst for future growth. So we have 21 different nations, which is many more than has ever participated in a Rugby League World Cup. We hope to work with the International Federation on a knowledge transfer programme that will help them stage future World Cups, however they do that and wherever that is. International Rugby League is dominated by England, Australia and New Zealand. There was a breakthrough moment in the last World Cup where Tonga reached the semi-finals and were almost qualified for the final, and that in itself was a real breakthrough moment for the sport. And there are many nations now who are pushing up to become quarterfinalists, to become semi-finalists, and over a long-term period will hopefully be competing to win the tournament. So it's just using this special moment as a World Cup of making more nations competitive, increasing the number that play. And our international development programme that we've been undertaking, clearly currently suspended due to the pandemic, but we visited West Africa, we went to Nigeria, who aren't playing in our tournament, but as part of a sports diplomacy initiative. We visited Papua New Guinea and Jamaica and Brazil and the Netherlands, and plans to visit more countries and take our IP, our brand, our dynamism and try and excite people. And that's part of the responsibility of staging a World Cup.
Now we are approximately 10 months away from the event. The coronavirus is still very much present. What are the biggest challenges for you and your team now in the upcoming 10 months?
The biggest challenge, Marcus, is managing uncertainty. And I've been involved, as I said, for 25 years of you start off with a plan and you might have to amend the plan as you go. No one has been part of a pandemic before in this way that it's affected every single person throughout the world. So we try to focus on the things that we can control, and the other things in the environment, whether it's quarantine, vaccine, international travel, physical distancing at venues, mass social gatherings, etc. We can't control those. So we've got to obviously liaise with UK government and keep an eye on what's happening across the world and be agile and react accordingly. But the pandemic it's just been incredible of how fast moving things have developed. If we think back to the start of March and the world looked a very different place. So we've got to use time, which is on our side at the moment. And we've got to look at every conceivable possibility. There is a possibility that the event might have to be moved and pushed back. There is a remote possibility that the event won't happen. And that's, we've just got to not bury our heads in the sand, not sugarcoat things. This is a global crisis, but also be positive and have a hope and optimism for the future.
Yeah. You wrote a very interesting article, Leading in Uncertain Times. And what you said there was that this is the greatest leadership challenge our generation has faced. So how are you leading? Since you are the CEO, how do you lead in these unprecedented times?
I think with calmness, making rational decisions, and also with positivity. It's very easy at this point in time, and certainly 3 months or so ago when we're working from home, we're actually recruiting people. So there aren't many people recruiting at the moment, and we are one of them. We've virtually onboarded colleagues. It's very easy to get a little bit down and start to worry about what might happen. But I think my job as a leader is to be a role model and try and be a good communicator. I think communication has never been more important than at this point in time, and that's with my team, my board, our many stakeholders. And I think ramping that up and increasing the volume of communication and being absolutely transparent. So the positivity to tinge with the realism of the size of the challenge.
So looking ahead for the event, some leagues they are playing with no live audience. Could that be one way to go for you? Because I know that ticketing is an important part of your planning.
As things stand, Marcus, I think it's highly unlikely that we would stage the event behind closed doors. We could stage the event with social distancing, so depending on how much of the stadium we can open. But all of those options remain, and of course the option to push the event back into 2022. One of the big challenges for International Rugby League, as you said, there are two main leagues. There is the league in Australia, the NRL, and the league here, the Super League. Both are now back playing. The NRL back playing in front of crowds in Australia. Super League here, not yet playing in front of crowds. So all of that still is in the mix. Could this event happen completely behind closed doors? I would suspect not. And that's purely because of the business model and the volume of games that we have.
I understand that. So the event hopefully will take place next year in England. How important is this event for England and for to the drive of tourism and for the sport itself?
Yeah, it's a really good question. This is, I believe, a transformative moment for the sport. I mentioned earlier that the sport is 125 years old. This is the single biggest event that it's attempted to stage. So it has could have a positive impact on rugby league in the UK, a positive impact on rugby league internationally, hopefully attract new people to come and enjoy the sport and that to be a long-lasting legacy. From a wider benefit, we talk a lot about social benefits being the real key driver, the social impact rather than economic impact. But certainly from a tourism perspective, from a UK government perspective, this is a really important event, and UK government so far have been fantastic in their support. There aren't that many World Cups that come round in any sport to stage, so they are special things to nurture, and everyone's doing everything they can to make sure it happens in the way we would hope.
You have said that the Rugby League World Cup 2021 is perfectly placed, and looking back, since almost all major events in 2020 were cancelled, do you feel like 2021 is the perfect year for you to organise this event?
At the start of the year, we did our draw at Buckingham Palace with Prince Harry, which was a really fantastic moment for the tournament. And of course, in January, we talked a lot about 2021 being the year for us to shine, that there weren't many other events. And months later, of course, many events have been displaced. But that, I think, worked in our favour. The Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics, the men's football European Championships here in England and across Europe, and many others. I still think we've got the opportunity to shine. It's just about making sure we're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So you mentioned that rugby is celebrating its 125th birthday. How have you seen the sport evolve during these years, and what do you see if we look ahead?
I think the sport in 1895 was born out of adversity. And adversity has been something that the sport has had to overcome within its heritage and its history. The Rugby League World Cup, the men's tournament was first played for in 1954. So it's the second oldest sporting World Cup. And the reason it came into being was a very brave Frenchman called Paul Barrière, who was a resistance fighter in the Second World War and effectively saw the power that international sport could do and presented the trophy and so on. 16 editions later, we get to stage the tournament. So the history is just there to celebrate. Lots of adversity, lots of challenge. Rugby League has been an innovator throughout its history. talk about video referee and stop clocks and all different things. Rugby League has constantly innovated, and I hope that we get a chance to also take that to the next level in 2021. We've got some really exciting ideas about the digital space that we'd love to occupy and just carry on that evolution of the sport.
So how important would you say that the technological advances are for the sport of rugby?
I think it's very important for sports and entertainment, full stop. The world was changing. How people consume sports and entertainment was changing before the pandemic. I think a lot of that now will be supercharged by the different world that we ultimately will live in. But how people consume sport from a live perspective in venue and also digitally at home, we have to be better than ever before. We have to be slightly different, and we have to understand the contemporary way that all of that environment is changing. But I see that as a wonderful opportunity for us all, and undoubtedly for future people staging sports events, it will be a essential part of their plan, not a desirable part.
Definitely. In all physical sport, there is always talk about head injury. Nowadays, the technology and the equipment is getting better and better. How are you and your team working on reducing the risk of head injuries and concussions?
I think from a tournament perspective, I mean, we're fortunate to be working with the national governing bodies, both in Australia and here in the UK, who are doing this on a day-to-day basis. So to be able to learn from them, looking after the athletes, player welfare is of the utmost importance, and the concussion management and treatment is absolutely a pivotal part of that. So player welfare generally in sport is in the spotlight, and the health and well-being and the safety of the people that we will have in our care is the number one priority. So I think there's been huge advancements in how technology has helped with concussion identification and treatment, and I'm sure that will continue to evolve, and embrace that with both hands.
If we talk a little bit about you and your career, you started your sports management career with the PGA in 1995, if I'm correct. And how come that you got into golf, and how was it to work for such a large organization there?
Yeah, I'm definitely not a golf fan, Marcus. So I studied sport management at university. I graduated, like many other graduates now, applying for lots and lots of jobs and getting lots of negative responses back. And I guess I was really fortunate that my first break came working on the European Golf Tour. I did that for probably about 5 years as a young, 22, 23-year-old traveling the world. Literally traveling the world and going from event to event. And it taught me an awful lot about hard work, about resilience, about planning, and being part of a professional environment. So I've seen lots of the world's very best golf courses, Marcus, but never really had the inclination to go and play.
I see. And then you moved on in 1999 to Manchester FA and working a lot with the grassroots.
Yeah, working a lot with grassroots and also with professional clubs for the Football Association. We're very lucky. I was seconded to UEFA for a year when the Champions League final 2003 was staged at Old Trafford. So again, an insight of community development mixed with events and working with professional football clubs. So football, yeah, an interesting industry, and certainly that helped massively with my career.
And why is grassroots so important?
Grassroots is a pipeline of talent for all of the professional footballers. Lionel Messi started off playing, grassroots football, community football, and then very quickly moved into the professional sphere. And it's the same in every sport. And rugby league is hugely reliant on that pipeline of community players. So we need to look after community sport because it is the lifeblood of professional sport.
Yes, definitely. And then you started your own sports consultancy company. What drove you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think maybe some of the Rugby League World Cup values, just being bold and brave. It was a moment in my career where I'd always wanted to work for myself. We had the opportunity, I worked with a colleague, an opportunity to do what we enjoyed doing, which was continue to deliver events and also specialise in helping community clubs get funding for large capital projects. It was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a moment in time in our career that probably learnt more at that point than at any other time, because you were looking after yourself, looking after your family, paying a mortgage, and completely reliant on the work that you won and brought in, and delivering that to a really high standard. So, yeah, a bit of everything, but very enjoyable.
And then in 2011, you got into rugby. Is this your true passion, rugby? Have you been playing rugby yourself?
Yeah, not very well, but yes, I played both codes, both rugby union and rugby league. Rugby is my passion. I went to my first game when I was 5 with my dad in 1979. 40 plus years of watching my hometown team. So yeah, it was a privilege in 2011 to work on the, at the time, 2013 Rugby League World Cup, and to be part of a sport that I thoroughly love and have a huge passion for.
Did you get involved with the federation, or where did you start in 2011? And how was the journey up until where you are now at the rugby league?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So my role in 2011 was the operations director for the 2013 Rugby League World Cup, which was staged in the UK. That was a successful event, but very different to what we're doing at the moment. Very small budget, very small team, but delivered great success. I then had a secondment. I worked on the Tour de France, the Grand Départ, when it was here in the UK in 2014. And since then, worked on the 2017 World Cup as the tournament commissioner for the International Federation. That was in Australia, New Zealand and Papua New Guinea. And then was delighted to accept the role as chief executive of this tournament. So all of the above. I was also the director of projects for the governing body, which was a really interesting opportunity, and that was an opportunity to almost be minister without portfolio. So it was an incredibly diverse role. But yeah, for the last few years working as chief exec on this tournament, and it's certainly been challenging, but it is a huge privilege to be doing the job I'm currently doing.
Yeah, so you mentioned it's been challenging. My next question is if you've had any bumps on the road in your career, and if so, how did you overcome these?
Yeah, I think with a positive mindset, we've recently employed a leadership coach, and it's been really useful to reflect about some of the, as you say, bumps in the road and challenges that have made us into the people that we are today. But definitely to develop resilience, to have a mindset where you will face adversity, you'll face some challenging situations, but to be true to your own personal values. And I think some humility is incredibly important in a leader. I think someone with a passion and someone with high emotional intelligence is really important. So the world has changed, people have changed, younger people are making more ethical-based decisions, and leadership also has to change with it. So it's been a very steep learning trajectory, but something I've really embraced and enjoyed.
So you mentioned that you have a leadership coach. Earlier in your career, have you had a mentor or someone that you looked up to?
Yeah, not formally. I've had very, very influential people. My dad has probably been the most influential person in my career, and someone I've always looked up to. I've worked for some really inspirational people throughout my career, and they've been hugely motivational for me, aspirational, and they've been coaches in a sort of informal way. But yeah, it's only more recently where we've actually employed someone in a formal role. And what that's taught me is reflection is so important. It's very easy in the world that we live in today to just carry on. You've got to stop and you've got to reflect, and sometimes you might have to change direction.
When we talked about education earlier, you mentioned that you had some trouble getting a job after you got your degree, and I for one has been in the same situation. So what would be your best advice for young people who aspire for a job in sports management?
I think to have a positive mindset. It's very easy to receive lots of rejections and get quite downhearted. I think you've got to believe in yourself, be confident. I think people have to find a point of difference. So if 100 people apply for a job working with us, in the first instance, to get to interview stage, you've got to sift out and try and find that point of difference. So volunteering, sticking your hand up and exposing or being exposed to different experiences, I think is hugely advantageous. And once you get your first foot on the career ladder, then it's very easy to progress. But that first foot on the ladder is undoubtedly the hardest. So we have seen recently enormous number of people applying for roles, and I think that's a mixture of people graduating, but also people unfortunate through the pandemic having lost the job and been made redundant. So we appreciate how challenging the job environment is. And the sports industry will recover. Sport is critically important to the health and well-being of the GDP of each individual country. So it's just to take a long-term view, be positive, and be relentless.
Both you and I have studied sports management, but far from everyone has a sports management educational background. They might come from marketing, they might come from communication. Do you feel like the sports management education gave you the sufficient knowledge that you needed? Or do you think that you can come from a different educational path and still make a career in sports?
I definitely think you can, and there is a high desire more and more for people with a marketing background, people with a communication background, people who understand data, understand the digital world, and also commercial. So I think all of those should not put anyone off if you have a degree in any of those things about working in the sports industry. For me, I learned lots of the theory, and I've been now able to go out and put that into practice. And I guess what I draw on from university was the most wonderful 3 years of my life, and as well as learning, it also taught me many social skills, and those social skills of networking, meeting new people, definitely are something I draw on still today. The advice I would give anyone is follow your dreams. And if your dream is to work in sport, whether that's in a professional football club, an event, maybe in an agency, because people maybe look at the world of sports and think it's one particular thing. Actually, the sports industry is incredibly diverse, more diverse than ever before. But yeah, if people have that passion, follow your dreams and just keep being relentless.
So in your line of work, it's sports management, but it could also be event management.
Yeah, a lot of what I've done is manage events or be part of events. I think my skill set's changed certainly over the past few years, where it was quite operational previously, so actually getting the athletes on the field of play, and now it's much more corporate. It's working with the board, it's managing a risk register, it's managing the cash flow and the finances. So the analogy I would use, Marcus, is teacher. When a teacher becomes a head teacher, they don't teach very much. They spend a lot of the time actually managing the school and managing the business. And I think that's probably a bit of my role. It was the teacher bit was the operations bit, and now the head teacher bit is actually steering the ship and keeping everything on track.
Yeah, I understand. If we're going back to rugby and the sport of rugby, if there is something I know after talking to my friends who are playing rugby, is that they hate when you mix it up with American football.
Rugby league and rugby union get mixed up an awful lot, and again, I in trying to educate people, I talk about hockey, ice hockey, and field hockey. They've both got hockey, and they're two completely different games. And I think rugby union is a brilliant sport and something that rugby league can learn a lot from. But yeah, I went to China last year, and we're talking to the Rugby Federation, who not only look after rugby league and rugby union, they also look after American football. And it's basically anything with an oval-shaped ball. And certainly American football and rugby of either code couldn't be any more different. But I love NFL and constantly, and I'm amazed by the athleticism of the players. And just to admire different sports and to learn from different sports is a really good thing. Yeah.
For someone who is not sure if they will watch or attend the World Rugby in 2021, what do you want to say to them?
I want to say come and have a look at some of the things that we've already done. We want to inspire, we want to engage, we want to really excite people. This is about an experience. So in the middle of it, there will be 80 minutes of fantastic rugby league, but it's much more than that. And hopefully we can give people a really wonderful experience, and come and watch some of the exciting nations. Come and watch Tonga prepare to play Samoa, and Fiji's prepare to play the Cook Islands, because actually the way that the Pacific nations approach the games, it's a sight to behold on its own. So there's lots of things to look forward to, and we'd love people to be a little bit curious and come and have a look.
I'm sure it will be an incredible event, and you have 10 more months to plan it.
We do, and just working through the current challenges, but everything we said, Marcus, is just being positive, and World Cups are really special. So we've got to just stay focused on the things that we can control.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, is it something that I haven't asked you that you would like to mention?
No. Perhaps one of the things that we have launched recently, which will be relevant from a learning perspective, is an innovation academy. So we launched an innovation academy and a sustainability charter. The sustainability charter very much around being responsible and having that ethical approach. But the innovation academy is to try and use some of the talent, whether it be graduates or people with trying to put the first foot on the career ladder, and give them an experience of working on a major sports event. And this will only be in a really small way. We'll unfortunately only be able to take less than the people that apply. But maybe it's something that other events in the future will also start to have. So whether that's actual internships, whether it's placements, whether it's just simply experiences that we can give to people, and we want to use that because we've got the chance. So hopefully that will excite people, particularly in the UK, but I do think it's relevant across the world for other events to have a look at.
Is that part of your CSR plan?
It is. It's an extended part. So that our environmental or sustainability charter went live a couple of weeks ago, and the Innovation Academy is about just using young, smart, hungry, talented people, but also to give them something back. I think, we'd regret not doing it, and we talk a lot about sitting when the fireworks have gone off after the trophies have been lifted and making sure we don't have any regrets. And if we work a little harder, then it will absolutely be worth it. And if we can maybe find some people who in 20, 25 years' time are running their own world global events, that will be a brilliant thing in itself.
There are interesting times ahead, to say the least.
There certainly are, Marcus.
So last question. So this is the Sports Management podcast. Who do you believe I should interview next from the world of sports management?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure who you've interviewed already. Rather than say someone specifically, I think if you look at sectors, I think the world of esports is utterly fascinating. And I think that's something that I'm sure your listeners will be keen to hear more of. And I also think that the newer, more innovative events, I think Formula E is wonderful. Sail GP, they are events that have really innovated and have been really successful. So I think your listeners would love to hear from some of the people that have been at the forefront of blazing the trail.
Yeah, esports will be one episode, but sailing, you said?
Sail GP, which and there are many different products, but they very much looked at how can you innovate in sailing by having a really wonderful digital experience. And I think through how they've placed cameras on the boats, how they've used their app, how they've really brought to life that in a really smart way. And there are many, many other sports that have innovated in the same way. But I just think that for people coming into the industry, sport isn't like what it was 25 years ago when I started my career. Far from it. There's many more short form games. Almost every sport now has that short form game. And of course, the Olympics, skateboarding, sport climbing, breakdancing, all of those things will be part of the Olympic family going forward. And that's definitely the trajectory that sport's gone. So I'm sure your listeners would love to hear about the more innovative, exciting, different sports.
I think so too. Thank you so much for taking your time and to be on the Sports Management podcast.
My pleasure, Marcus.
Thank you for listening to Sports Management Podcast. Do you have thoughts or ideas about this podcast, or do you know someone that I should interview next? Please reach out to me on sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or visit my website sportsmanagementpodcast.com. If you prefer social media, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram @sportsmpodcast.